Morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's edition of Pre-Market Pulse, 3rd of July, 2025. The S&P notching a new record on Vietnam trade deal. The details of the deal are pretty sketchy and seem extraordinarily unfavorable to Vietnam. So I'm sure there'll be devil in the detail. But I think what Trump's trying to do here is obviously set a pretty big precedent. So as negotiating power for the next deals. Basically, zero tariffs on anything coming into Vietnam from the US, and then 20 to 30% tariffs on Vietnam goods coming into the US. So, yeah, it doesn't sound like a particularly fair deal to me. We are at 3 deals done now, as you can see there, and about 97 to go. So, and that includes China, which really doesn't, there is no major details on as yet. So, market got a little bit optimistic, and obviously the Indian deal as well is on the table. Interestingly, though, having a look at Mr. Trump's dealings in the US, in India. There is basically 7 Trump towers going up. There's 3 existing. He does a huge amount of deals over there. They've promised, in inverted commas, to not be doing deals, but obviously President Trump's son, Eric, and Donald Trump Jr. Are pretty active in the Indian market. So you would probably expect that deal to go through with some make goods in the future, knowing Trump. So economic data overnight revealed some underlying challenges. US private payrolls fell 33,000. So ADP numbers is what these are called. There's not always a direct correlation between the payrolls numbers and these in the short term, but that's the first negative number in 2 years. So look, with payrolls out tonight, I would say this session we're coming up to now really is going to be looking maybe a little bit risk off. Obviously, and we've had a pretty good start to the week, as you can see there. The Dow up 3.5, the S&P up 2.2 for the week, Russell up 4, but the Russell being the small cap index there. The small caps are actually at one of their lowest points in history against the larger cap companies. That's not usually a great sign for the broader economy. The last time it was this low in terms of performance was the 2001 tech bubble. So not to say that necessarily is going to happen this time around. I think the larger cap stocks now compared to 2001 are much more stable companies sitting on much higher levels of cash and have much better business models because they learnt their lessons from that period. Now, I think we saw a bounce back in Tesla overnight. They're up 4.97%. NVIDIA, Apple, obviously, as we've discussed, is a bit more of a defensive these days. Oracle was up, Google was up, and then the rest of the broader market just, fairly haphazard, to be brutally honest. United Health was down. That entire health services sector was down. That sector is looking very cheap, but we don't really want to be looking at that until it starts to show any form of stabilization. United Health was the biggest health company in the world by quite a large margin, and it is obviously off around about 50% this year. A lot of weird things happening in that company, but once it bottoms out, I mean, the leverage and the scale in that stock will be quite is quite extraordinary. And you've got there was a comparison made between Palantir, which is on a 200 plus forward PE ratio, is now bigger than United Health, which used to be the largest healthcare company in the world. And I agree with what the comment was said was, in 2 years' time, we'll look back and we'll probably realise how ridiculous that was in the scheme of things. So yeah, but only time will tell. Trump's big, beautiful bill. It obviously made it through and moved to the House for the final July 4 deadline. It made it by 1 vote. It introduced new reductions. There is now negotiations going on back at the House. I think they'll want to get this done in the next 24 hours. They're talking about obviously staying back. and until it gets done, and they won't want to do that on the 4th of July holidays. So I would probably expect some progress in the next 24 hours. And in some corporate news as well, Microsoft announced its largest round of layoffs since 2003, affecting about 4% of its workforce. Now, the company's adjusting to, obviously, economic conditions, but also their investment in AI infrastructure. And obviously, Microsoft being at the forefront for AI infrastructure and workflow optimization, you would expect them to be, the canary in the mine shaft for the labour market in terms of AI jobs. We can see the commodities here: gold and silver up overnight, copper as well. Copper's sort of hovering around that 15-year, that record high. Silver going back towards that 15-year high, and I would, I think there might be a similar situation with copper, where once it busts, it might do what silver did and probably have a really nice run to the upside. It's around about that $5.25 a pound is the high, and we're sort of hovering around that area now as we speak in the July futures. So platinum had another awesome run overnight, up 5%. We're at record highs in platinum. There has been times in history it's at around about 1,450 an ounce. There have been many times in history where platinum has actually been more expensive per ounce than gold. So I'm not saying it's going to double, but there is the possibility there. We have some platinum on for our clients, and it's been a very, very nice trade for us in the last month in particular, as well as silver. We're starting to see a bit of a shift out of gold. So lithium ETF, interestingly, has headed higher in the last in the last week as well, up 7.2%. Very much coming off a low base though, so I wouldn't pay too much attention to that. Coal's up about 3% for the week, and crude's rebounded around about 3.5%. Iron ore as well, up around about 2% for the week, and we're starting to see that shift into the mining sector. Out of the banks is becoming a bit of a popular headline for the local press. So I would expect to see that switch continue, because the mining stocks are incredibly cheap. And look, I think once people start to go digging, they're going to see fairly deep value there, particularly if we start to see any better numbers from the Chinese economy overall. So as per usual, obviously, we have a look at this every day. The global calendar, pretty thin today, just non-farm payrolls tonight, and then the July 4 holiday. I would definitely expect there to be a bit of a risk-off atmosphere in Asian session, and probably the European session leading into that payrolls number. And then I would expect that payrolls number to dictate what happens over the long weekend. We can get some fairly severe moves, particularly in that Asian session on that Monday when there's public holidays like this and significant news is out. So, I expect some volatility over the coming days. So, stay safe out there, and we will speak tomorrow.